Unlearning proposes that new ways of learning can only be acquired when individuals unlearn those thoughts, those emotions, and those behaviors that prevent us from fully flourishing in the world.
2 weeks into this course, my heart already knew that my entire viewpoint on humanity was going to change.
During the years that I've worked with Taryn, she has assisted me in seeing the potential as an individual, and the course has changed my life for the better. I am the person that I am today because of the course that I enrolled for.
I've been lecturing the content for 7 years, and every year I am in awe of students who share how the content has transformed them both academically and personally. I believe that the world right now is in desperate need of an education that equips individuals with both academic and personal development skills.
Before this course happened, I used to hate people from the bottom of my soul. But after this course, for the first time in my life, I can say that I no longer hate people. I can finally say that I no longer see people for their circumstances, but rather for who they are as people and who they can become.
The things that I learned in my early childhood about who I was not and who I was supposed to be. However, the course showed me the true identity of myself. It showed me that it was okay to be vulnerable. It showed me that it was okay to heal. And throughout the course, I have grown tremendously.
And the Unlearning course does that. I realized that the content was so powerfully transformative that it would be irresponsible, that it would be selfish for me not to share it with the world. Unlearning is really a course that I've been lecturing for 7 years, but I've made it bigger, I've made it better, and I'm excited to incorporate the performing arts. I do not believe that unlearning needs to be clinical and boring. We can also make unlearning entertaining and fun.
To anyone that would want to enroll in this course, it will not only benefit you academically, but also individually. It will assist you in presenting yourself as the true individual that you are, but it will also assist you in healing and journeying the life process.
This course was the missing puzzle piece that I needed in my journey of self-transformation and self-discovery. And most of all, this course taught me how to unlearn this toxic behavior and how to choose happiness and positivity in the present and to stop worrying about tomorrow.
The gift of this course is that it is universally applicable to any personal and professional context. Cornerstone, learn to change the world.
In this time of great uncertainty, there's one thing you can be certain of: your education. Our wide range of online programs let you upskill yourself and earn a leading-edge qualification from the comfort of your own home. We've been educating Africa for 50 years, so we know how to adapt to our forever-changing landscape. Learn to change the world and take control today. Speak to one of our student advisors. Visit cornerstone.ac.za to enroll now.
Of our toughest social, economic, and political challenges. They've looked at issues such as gender-based violence, urban food security, and the impact of COVID-19 on higher education. These debates are now coming to you via this 2-hour radio show, as well as streaming via Facebook and YouTube. It will also be edited into a 1-hour podcast for listening at your convenience. Hosted by veteran journalist Ryan Fortune, it will see a rotating lineup of guests, speaking on topics such as community health and wellness, the state of African book publishing, the viability of a basic income grant in South Africa, policing and gangsterism on the Cape Flats, contemporary Khoisan conflicts, the pitfalls and opportunities in the current state of the internet, and much, much more. We hope you enjoy these discussions and encourage you to call in with your thoughts, ideas, questions, and solutions at Bush Radio on 021 448 3277 or message us on Bush Radio WhatsApp at 061 862 1065. If you are watching our live stream on Cornerstone's Facebook page or YouTube channel, please feel free to leave your comments there.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Langtry and I will be your guest host for this episode of Cornerstone Critical Dialogue. This evening our topic is the South African film and television industry, hope for a new tomorrow. Some of the questions that we will be exploring are: what is needed for the local film industry to realize its full potential? What needs to happen for the South African film industry to be as competitive as Hollywood, Bollywood and the movie industries of China, the UK and Japan? And we'll also talk about transformation of the industry. In this final episode of the current season of the Cornerstone Critical Dialogues on Bush Radio, I will interview members of the South African film industry who have been blazing new trails to help answer these questions and to get a sense of the amazing possibilities that the industry holds to not only contribute to economic development, but also to sustain the arts and cultural life of the country. I have two guests in the studio with me, and another two guests who will link up with us during the course of the evening. First up is Wiam Williams, screenwriter, director, actor, and poet. Documentary directorial debut, Hip Hop Revolution, had its international premiere at Silver Docs in 2007. It won the Best Edited Film Award at NYC Real Sisters Film Festival in 2008 and has been screened in 28 countries. Wiam undertook a last release documentary film, District 6 Rising from the Dust, in 2013 with cinematographer and editor Nafia Cox and completed it in 2019. The film has won an Award of Excellence from the Scandinavian International Film Festival, a Florence Film Award for Best Original Story, Best Documentary at Beyond the Curve International Film Festival, and Best Documentary at Wales International Film Festival in 2021. Wiam is currently in production for another documentary called The Rise, which was selected to showcase as a work in progress at the Doc Corner in Cannes. She has reignited a love for fiction storytelling with the short film Two Yous, released in 2020. Two Yous is a short narrative film which looks at the ambiguous identity of Muslim women living in a Western context and the duality of patriarchy. It won Best Short Film at Beyond the Curve International Film Festival, Best Directed Short Film at the North Europe International Film Festival, and Best Women Empowerment Film at the Berlin Short Film Festival, as well as Best Lead Actress in a Short Film at the West Europe International Film Festival. More recently also it won the award for Best Featurette at the Wallachia International Film Festival in Romania. Wiam has recently completed the feature-length screenplay for Two Yous and has been selected among 20 filmmakers worldwide to participate in the Largo AI program. She's currently co-writing a screenplay with prolific author Tsotsi. Wiam, welcome to the studio.
Hello, Stephen. That's quite a long introduction.
Very long, but very accomplished. Do you want to tell us briefly how you got involved or started in the film industry?
My first job in the industry was actually as a screenwriter for Soul Buddies, the TV series Soul Buddies. And shortly after that, I realized that I actually wanted to direct. And documentary was a good entry point into directing, you know. So that's how I got into the film industry, yeah.
Oh, great, yeah. Our next guest is Velma Pfaff. And she self-describes as a colorful woman, born and raised in Cape Town. Early childhood in South Africa shaped her understanding of difference. She was naturalized in Toronto, Canada, which she says deeply affected her view of inclusion, acceptance, and proper representation. A return to South Africa in 1996 alerted her to the fact that transformation and inclusion require active re-education and participation through government-sponsored programs to assist the evolutionary inevitability of an integrated creative community. She's worked in film in Cape Town since 1996 and has a very clear understanding of the creative landscape on the ground. Worked in film for over 25 years as an art director. She was trained by the Directors Guild of Canada and educated through internships with the Canadian Film Centre, Alliance Atlantis, and Women in Film and Television. Possesses a deep knowledge of development, production, and distribution. She has attended the Cannes Film Festival on behalf of the Cape Town International Film Market and Festival. And where she has identified marketing potential for South African projects and festivals. And there's a current partnership with Netflix and SA Tourism where she believes that South Africa has a great opportunity to demonstrate our rich and varied history, culture, and language capacity to the world. She's currently the manager of the Durban International Film Festival 2022. And I'd like to start there, Velma. Tell us a bit more about film festivals. We just heard about all the awards that Viam has won at international film festivals. Tell us a bit more about film festivals and their role in the film industry.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the introduction. I think there's a great potential, and I believe during this whole lockdown and COVID situation of 2 years of being, kind of in our own homes, we really see the value of culture. And we see the value of film more clearly, perhaps, than just in general when there's a lot of competition for other entertainment venues. I think festivals have a great role to play. I mean, Wiam's resume reads clearly. All of her achievements are garnered at international festivals. And that is exactly what festivals exist for. It's an international platform for creative people to come together. The strength of meeting all kinds of people from different places in the world, working together to coordinate projects, that gives you the impetus to move your project forward. So I think I call it's a cultural asset to have a national festival like we do at the Durban International Festival, and it's extremely important for festivals to celebrate local and international talent and to broker creative futures. That's what a festival is.
Sure. So besides the Durban International Film Festival, which other sort of film festivals are there in South Africa?
There used to be Satenge. There still is a Cape Town International Festival, but I
don't think that's happening anymore.
Right. It might have disappeared. A lot of things have sort of disappeared due to COVID. There is a Joburg Festival. And, currently Durban has been running online for 2 years. So we were very fortunate that our director, Dr. Ishmael Mohammed, put us online during COVID. And because we couldn't guarantee that we could have live events, we went to a platform, Shift 72, and we have an online festival which is accessible to everyone in South Africa. And that itself has been great. That then means we have a greater reach. It's not just a geographical specificity of having to travel all the way to Durban. Look, for filmmakers and artists, being present at a physical festival is key.
Sure.
For audience members, it's also key to build their interest in the industry and for them to become more media savvy. But now that we are more online, it also gives the world an opportunity to not only access us, the Durban International Film Festival, but to also access the talks, the workshops, the masterclasses, the interviews. So the audience engagement will grow, and that will hopefully grow the industry.
Sure. So Viam, someone who's won quite a few awards at international film festivals, how does your film get selected to be screened at a film festival?
So you have to submit it to the festival, and it's up to the curatorial team whether they want to show it or not. And I think it's very interesting that a festival like Durban International Film Festival in the past, for many years, didn't make their curatorial teams public, and this year, 2022, I've just looked at their feed, and it's really healthy to see that they're making their programming teams public. So yeah, but submitting to a festival, it's a process, and we have to pay fees, submission fees as well. A lot of the success with my work has come through festivals actually reaching out to me, and sending me fee waivers. I literally get fee waivers every single day from festivals, and I can't follow up with all of them. At some point I have to say, I actually need to stop submitting, because it becomes very taxing sometimes if your work is screening in a festival, because you have to promote the screenings, and then when or if I win, there's all the press that comes along with it, and so it takes a lot of time and energy, and sometimes I also just want to be a creative and be quiet and write, and so I think there's a time and place for everything with me and the way I do things. Yeah.
Sure. No, great. So the international exposure, of course, it comes to film festivals are quite important for I guess for any creative person in terms of developing their art further. And South Africa itself lends itself to attracts a lot of people from other countries to come. So there's a sort of, I guess, there's a bit of a symbiotic relationship between South Africa and the South African film industry and the international film festival. I read somewhere that the South African film industry has the potential to generate 120 billion rand for the economy. Now, I know that both of you, to an extent, have been involved in sort of promoting the film industry in terms of the economic development of the film industry. And I know that, Velma, you've worked with the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program. You've had some work with the National Film and Video Foundation. You've done some work with them as well, I believe.
Yeah, that was through that. Yeah,
do you want to talk about the potential that the industry has for economic?
Yes, absolutely. And further to, I just want to finish with a comment on what Wiham was saying about submissions. So we are running submissions right now on Film Freeway for the Durban International Film Festival, and that is how people get their films into festivals. They pay a submission fee, and then they upload their film, or they get a waiver from the marketing department if they can't afford. So we give waivers, for instance, to Iranian filmmakers who have no capacity to pay through PayPal or by credit card. So we give them a fee waiver so that their filmmakers can submit their films to our festival because they have high quality content. So again, this is a great opportunity for economic growth, right? So it's an economic opportunity for relationships with international countries and with obviously then embassies and consuls through culture. So the film submission process is the beginning of the whole process, and the film festival is the arena in which creatives can then come together, meet, audiences can screen projects they would never see otherwise. And back in the day, because we're in a new world now, to an extent, the world is no longer run by the distribution networks that existed in the past. So if you showed your film at a festival, what you were hoping for is somebody would pick it up and buy it. If they bought it for a certain period of time in a certain region in the world, and they could screen it in the theater or on television or on a streaming network. Now that we have so many streaming platforms, it's a very different world. So we're seeing the benefit of that. And when I talk now to the question of economics that you mentioned before, there is a massive potential for economic growth because the film industry not only brings production, it brings ancillary product, which means when people come from Hollywood, Bollywood, Nollywood, Germany to produce a film in South Africa, not only do they bring their $100 million or whatever to make a movie, But those people have to stay in hotels, they have to hire cars, they have to hire equipment, they have to eat, they spend all their time in hotels and restaurants, and they take trips and tours. And because they are exposed to the country, there's a potential for greater economic engagement. This is what you mentioned. We've identified, finally, Netflix identified, took Netflix, I suppose, to identify that people are 3 times more likely to travel to a destination if they see it in a movie.
Wow.
So now tourism has suddenly woken up and realized that the hundreds of millions of rands that they have to spend on marketing South Africa as a destination may be better spent on films. Because if you're getting 3 times greater return for your value, then you might as well help people make better trailers, go to locations, use drone shots, do crane shots, really highlight. And if you guys watch movies, you'll see it happening right now. Emily in Paris, there's like a whole bunch of snapshots of just locations. It's got nothing to do with the story. They're in Saint-Tropez. You see hundreds of shots of Saint-Tropez. You see all the best hotels in Saint-Tropez, the best restaurants. So there is a potential now to integrate into screenplays and stories, a potential to show audiences, because of streaming platforms, how our country looks. And for South Africa, that's massive, because you have to realize that internationally, people still really don't know what we're all about.
Sure. I mean, I think, I don't know to what extent COVID has affected this, though, because there was a time when Cape Town was a very popular destination for film shoots, for location. Is that still the case?
That is still the case. However, we have been battered by not just Omicron and the recent lockdowns and the blocks on flights, but 2 years of film, kind of film being stopped or halted. I mean, there were, blood and water shot here. There were lots of films shooting during COVID. Even with COVID protocols, they were still shooting. The difficulty is we didn't have, the commercial industry apparently lost like more than 100 million instantly because people couldn't fly here. And this is our highest season, right? It's usually November, December, January, Feb, March. And so all of those things have affected us greatly. The benefit, I mean, there's always an upside to a downside. So the upside of the downside is Cape Town used to garner most of the production value. And Western Cape, with Westgro's assistance, was highly visible at international markets, and that drew a lot of people to the Cape. And then the regions around the Cape, Stellenbosch, etc., and just, the reachable, like 1 hour, 2 hour outside of Cape Town. Now we are recognizing that the Eastern Cape, for instance, has incredible locations, and the Eastern Cape has not been marketed at all. And just so you know, the Eastern Cape is going to be building a film studio, and Durban has a green light on a film studio. So this is good news, because we only have the one studio here, Cape Town Film Studio, which was initiated by Anand Singh and built here in Cape Town to help the industry. It's the only professional soundstage. And now we're going to have a professional soundstage in Durban and one in the Eastern Cape. So that is going to greatly influence the amount of productions and the nature of productions that will come into the country.
Sure. No, great. Wiam, you yourself, I mean, you've not only filmed in Cape Town. Starting off in the industry, was it Cape Town, or did you also work in other parts of the country?
All of my films have been made in Cape Town. I worked when I worked with Soul City. That was a Joburg-based production, so I wrote that. But just to add on to what Valma has been saying with regards to the income and monetary potential of the film industry, what's really interesting is the demand for local content by streamers like Netflix, and the doorway for opportunity to create local content, because our industry generally is a service-based industry, particularly in the Western Cape. And when we talk about the financial gain with regards to the film industry, it has predominantly been service companies, So I think it's really refreshing to see the demand for local content with decent budgets or the opportunity that exists at the moment. And I mean, it's not only Netflix. There are other platforms entering the market as well. Amazon's entering the South African market too. But there are also the smaller streaming platforms, which generates income for filmmakers. Yeah.
No, great. Yeah. So my next question is going to be though. So there is potential to make money, to put it crudely, but to get to that point, there obviously is some sort of investment required. Yeah. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I think with film, it's really. I always say this, but it's not an easy career path to choose. And once you've got this idea, for me personally, it's like I'm not going to stop until I make this film, and I will find the money to make the film. So I think we have to think of new ways of financing films. And at the moment, resources are in the hands of a cabal, if I can put it that way. Funding resources, certainly national funding resources. And one of the biggest disadvantages that we have in the Western Cape is that we don't have a regional film fund. And the National Film and Video Foundation doesn't have a lot of money, and there's so many filmmakers competing for that pool, and they also have chosen to work with a select group of people,
let's speak to that. So the thing is that we have a potential. There's a great potential to create revenue for many people, not just for industry professionals, of which we have many in the Western Cape, but obviously nationally there's a great push to train, educate, to help youth become media literate, to stream youth into script writing. We have a Zulu script writing program with the Durban International Film Festival that we are hoping to use as a model to roll out, because we have 11 national languages. And who's writing them? I mean, where are we seeing them? Except on the SABC. So thank you, SABC. I think there's a great potential for growth, but as William is saying, the funding sources have to be grown. And now we have Amazon and Netflix and Showmax. We have other producers other than CakeNet and Mnet and SABC financing production. And that's great, because with an international pool of money, there is a greater potential for local content to be developed.
Yeah.
But I would like to say that I think South Africa's at a tipping point, which happened in Canada. Canada used to be a service industry for the Americans. So we had an industry, but we basically just made American content. And then the Canadian government pushed a levy through, a 1% levy, production levy, that when you came to Canada to shoot a US movie, you had to pay a 1% levy, which went into financing Canadian productions. And Telefilm Canada and the National Arts Council, finance Canadian productions, which is just about Canadian content. And I think we have the potential here to follow a format where we start to produce local content that is locally specific, language specific, and that can help grow the industry in all of our provinces, not just the Western Cape. Yes, we have the infrastructure in the Western Cape, it exists. And we can use that as the capacity to build KZN and Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, to spread the pool. So I think William's point is we need more funding sources. We need private funding sources. We don't have a lot of private funders. And I think there's a potential with Bitcoin or with, people who have a lot of money and they're investing in other things like mutual funds, and there's a great potential because film makes a lot of money. Do you know Spider-Man made $1 billion? It made $1 billion. Can you think about that? At the theater. So it made like $400 million in the first couple of weekends.
So just to chip in there, this program that I'm doing right now, Largo AI, what they do is they literally take your script and it gets analyzed by artificial intelligence. And it breaks down the percentages of like what the elements of your script. So it's like 10% thriller, 40% drama, 12% sci-fi, etc. And then they target the audiences that will come and watch it. So I could get like exact stats with a certain budget range for what the first weekend release for 2Us would be in the UK. You know, and that's really interesting to have that kind of information at your fingertips as a filmmaker, because that's what the streamers do. They're putting your work through an algorithm.
Absolutely.
And to see, and artificial intelligence is giving them information in terms of their viewership and who would like this and what audiences it will reach. So it's amazing. It's a great reversal and a learning curve for me, certainly, to be able to look at the analytics and potential of the work that I have at the moment. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, because AI, as you mentioned, is exactly why the industry is transforming. That's why. The industry is transforming because all of the streaming platforms are noticing who's watching what. So they know if you watch a movie and it's a Black film from America, and then you look for more Black content, or you watch comedy and you like comedy, or you watch thrillers. So the algorithms have already identified that we have been watching content created by white men.
Yeah.
We do know that, I hope. I hope people are intelligent enough to know that 98% of the content you watch has been curated by white men. Then we won't go into the socioeconomic breakdown of who is creating what. But if it wasn't for Nollywood and Bollywood and other industrial complexes that are producing content, and let me tell you, Nollywood just knocked it out of the park during COVID, because they couldn't get any Hollywood films in their theaters. They have 200 theaters. So they filled their theaters with local content. And they made more money during all this period than they've ever made before, and grew their industry, because they couldn't get Hollywood content because there were no new films being released. So again, the AI algorithm is helping us to an extent, because it's pushing transformation.
So can I just chip in there again?
Yeah, okay.
What I'm really interested in at the moment, I know that we're all looking at investment and government funding, etc. But I'm really interested in the NFT space at the moment. And it's something we really we're definitely going to explore as a film funding mechanism for 2Us. And I'm really interested to see how that goes. My partner, Nafia, is tech genius. So he understands how all of that works, crypto, blockchain, NFTs, everything in that space. And yeah,
it is interesting. So what I understand about NFT funding for films means that you will buy a digital portion of the film. So you will basically invest. So it's kind of like people will invest in your movie instead of a distributor or a streaming platform. You may raise $1 million to make your movie because, 1 million people buy $1.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of
because
your
it's
non-fungible
decentralized.
token,
Yeah.
right? And then they own $1 of the profit share in your film.
Well, I mean, that's going to be really hard to have 1 million people owning $1 profit share. So I'm not.
I don't
think
know,
I'm going
but
to
that's
set it up that
basically
way.
what it means, yeah.
But there are different ways in which you can set it up, and it's all about the value for money that you're giving the person that's investing. And there's also patronage in that NFT space as well. So
That's good, because that's what we need. That's what the previous centuries gave us, is patronage.
Sure.
And that's what we don't have.
We're going to take a short break now. After the break, we'll be joined by a very familiar face on South African television. She'll be joining us on the line. But before that, we're first going to listen to another South African icon, the great Brenda Fassie.
Yo, make sure you keep it locked right here. Rip off the knob. 89.5.
Bush Radio 89.5.
You're listening to Cornerstone Critical Dialogues on Bush Radio 89.5. I have two guests in the studio with me, Williams and Valma Pfaff. And now we're being joined on the line by someone who is more used probably to being on the other side of the camera, Vanette Ibrahim, a South African actress. She learned acting in Cape Town, working as a stagehand, an actor, and other jobs in the theatre. Her father worked as a teacher in Woodstock, as well as an actor, writer, and director. And in the late 1950s, he moved the family to Coventry, England, to work as a stage manager. The family later returned to South Africa. And I think most of our listeners will know Vanette as the Charmaine Beukes Meintjes on the South African television soap opera Seven Dolan from 2000, which she played the role she played from 2000 to 2019. Vanette, very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very, very much, Stephen. Yeah, wow, that's really sort of my history being, dragged up from the past.
I was just thinking now, there's so many similarities between the three of you, because Viam and Valman are sitting here in the studio. You're in Joburg, but your sort of story started a few roads probably down from where our studio is in Woodstock. Do you want to tell us how your background influenced your decision to go into theatre and film? Yeah.
Well, first of all, let me just say hi to Velma and to Wiam, who I know since she was quite young, and I've been watching her career quite closely and very interestingly, because it's wonderful to see young people that I know just bloom and blossom and, take the world by storm, which she has been doing. So how's it, Wiam? Are you well?
Hello, Vanette. I'm so happy to be on the show with you.
Oh, man, yeah.
Yeah, just
and
to
congratulations with everything that's happening to you, sweetheart, really.
Thank you. I just want to quickly say Vanette has been one of those role model women in my life. And yeah, it's really cool to be on the show with her.
Thank you, and very, very nice to meet you, Valma, as well.
Hi, Vanette. Lovely to meet you too. It's my pleasure.
So let me just start by saying I actually grew up in Claremont, and my dad, I suppose, had that was before his whole shambled political career. He had a group. A theatre group, and I grew up sort of with the whole the smell of costumes and decor, and he was always building stuff in my grandmother's garage, or and things like that. And for me, that was the starting point of the magic. So, and watching rehearsals and traveling to Port Elizabeth, because my dad was a very keen Shakespeare, he had a very keen interest in Shakespeare and Genet and all those, and the late Bill Curry, he was part of all of that, and various other, people of color who were, Richard Reeve and people, they were all involved, and John Ramsdale and all those people, they were all part of that group. So yeah, I grew up very close to the theatre, so it's not surprising that the bug kind of bit. And later on, I can remember at school, for instance, there was a bid to do the nativity play, and they wouldn't allow me to be Mother Mary because I don't know, for whatever reason. Maybe I was too chubby. I think that was the reason. I was a very chubby child. I still am a short and chubby, but they wouldn't allow me to be Mother Mary. And so I came up with this idea of rewriting the nativity play and said, well, I've got an idea. Can I then be a blind girl who dreams of the nativity, and she wakes up and she experiences this whole thing, and she wakes up and she can see the next morning. And they thought it was a very interesting take on the nativity. So I was creative from quite a young age. So there was no other path that I really wanted to take. And after high school, I went straight into the Space Theatre. At the time, there was this whole thing at drama school. You had to, sign papers to say you wouldn't be involved in any subversive action at UCT and whatever. And I thought, to hell with all of that. I'm not going, down that road. And I went straight to the Space Theatre. And that is where I learnt my craft from wonderful people like Yvonne Dyson, Bill Curry, Peter Dirk Ace, or, Bill Curry, all these people who really contributed to the arts in South Africa, and that's where it all started for me.
That's great. And then, of course, into television, there was Sewende Laan, and now more recently, Binnelanders. Do you want to talk about how you got into that?
Well, Sewende Laan, I went into, it was just supposed to last for 6 months, and then almost well, and then definitely 19 years later, we parted ways. And then I did a little stint on Binnenlanders. But apart from TV, theater has always been my first love. So I made sure that I was involved in possibly every single festival that ran in South Africa. And I was just listening to Wiam and Valma talking about the importance of festivals in this country and the role that festivals play for artists and what a wonderful springboard for, to showcase your works. And it's just a pity that we hit the COVID situation, because that has kind of interfered greatly. But, it also made me think of the time when sanctions hit this country in the bad old days, and how we became, or necessity became, the mother of invention, and how wonderful it, festivals have become now, because most things are online. I mean, I'm looking at the Klein Karoo Kunstefees that they're doing an online festival. There's so many television, well, I shouldn't say so many, but quite a few television or film festivals are coming online. I was watching the National Theatre in London. They're now doing, or you can catch up on their productions online. So online has become the way to go, and I really, like I said, I mean, I digress from the question, but theatre is definitely my first love. And then TV, I started out before there was TV in this country, but that became a bonus. And as far as I'm concerned, yes, I mean, I've done lots of work on TV, and funnily enough, since COVID level 2, there's been such a lot done. I was actually quite amazed at the amount of work that I've managed to do in the last 2 years.
Oh, that's great. Then, of course, more recently, there's the movie Barakat, in which you play a leading role. Do you want to tell us something about that?
Well, please, everybody, keep your fingers crossed, because we've just been selected as South Africa's entry into the Oscars for 2022, and I really hope that something comes of it. We still have to go through the process of their panel, but we're hoping that something will happen. That was such an amazing process, because it was, I think it happened, we filmed in 2020, I think just before the huge lockdown, and it was, wow, what an amazing process. And I think one of the reasons that Barakat was such a fantastic film was because it was filmed with so much love, and it came from top down, and also, interestingly enough, it didn't showcase the sort of normal Cape Town, hotspot areas, the Camps Bay beaches and the mountain and your beautiful seascapes and your landscape. It was shot in places like Lansdowne and Rylands and your Cape Flats area, and it just resonated. It vibrated of home and places that people could actually relate to. And I think not just people of color or brown people, but everybody. And that's what made the movie so popular.
Oh, sure, thanks. Now, between the three of you, I mean, you've been I don't want to say around a long time because that's going to make it sound like you're old, but none of you are old.
I am old.
Over the years that you've been involved in the industry, I'm going to start with you,
okay.
Velma. What sort of changes? How much changes you've seen happened in the film, the theatre, festival industry?
Yeah, I work in the film industry only, so I don't work in theater, so I can't speak to that. But I do want to mention that, yes, I also worked on an SABC production in Athlone, which was called Melody. And that was,
Right.
so that is a transformational project because, as we know, it's not often that productions were shooting in Athlone or in Bokmakeri or in the Cape Flats, as you mentioned. And it was a beautiful potential to continue with the series. I don't think they got picked up again, but it was a first, project. And I think there is this great potential to work in all the areas that we see, like Barakat. When you look to the Cape Flats and to all of the different regions in not just the Western Cape, but all over the country, there are beautiful, beautiful regions and beautiful people that obviously translate well into film. Again, speaking to what Wiham said earlier, when we build local content, we tell authentic stories, and when we as filmmakers, writers, people of color, Africans, when we tell our stories, when we don't allow other people to tell our stories, then we have a greater potential to see the authenticity of who we are. And I think those projects are also coming to the forefront because they're directed by women, they're written by women, they have that authenticity, like Amy Jafta, I believe. Did she write?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, these things are very important because that kind of integrity and authenticity translates through the camera and comes like you said, comes down from the top,
Yeah.
And those are the potentials that we're looking at now at this tipping point, building indigenous and telling authentic stories.
Sure.
To build the film industry.
Viam, in terms of, would you concur with that? In terms of the changing scene of the industry, do you think that more people are beginning to tell their own stories? And
Yeah, certainly. I think, when I started about 15 or so years ago, for women of color, really the entry point was documentary. And there weren't really any women of color feature filmmakers, Black women feature filmmakers, just a rare breed. And I see more women directors coming out of this country and women of color directors, and there are a lot more opportunities for emerging women directors, I would say, than what there was 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
And that's great. Although also the industries at the moment is quite ageist. So
It is.
No, it is, and
Let's
it's
talk
something
about
we
that.
need to speak about as women because I spent when I started out as a filmmaker, I also just became a mother for the first time, and we have to balance. It's a fine balancing act being a mom and being a filmmaker, and so we can't work at the same pace as men do. We can't direct as many films as men do in the span of 10 years, and so I find that the industry, in the way that the approach at the moment is quite ageist because there needs to be a bigger consideration for women filmmakers, and there needs to be more opportunities available for women filmmakers.
You know what strikes me that it's almost sexist in we are in a sense. Sorry, what were you going to say, Lavi?
No, I'm agreeing with you. It is sexist because, women almost, they have a sell-by date in this industry,
Absolutely.
whereas men are like,
Forever. Yeah.
infinitude.
I think that's important, Wiham, and we have to mention it because it is ageism. Every entry for a woman either ends at 35. This is a fact. They'll say, submit your script or submit your project. But suddenly when you're 35, you're no longer of interest to anyone, or so it appears to me. So like Wiham's saying, you get married at 20, 25, you have children, you raise a family, you're going to be at least 35 or 37 by the time you even consider, your career.
Mm.
And that
Yeah.
is not being taken into account. So women
Well,
are being
it-
asked to participate in the industry, but they're also being
Yeah.
capped, you know?
Yeah.
Well, if I can just interrupt here, what I found so beautiful on two sets that I worked on, one being with Conita Adams, who was also a new mother at the time, and you know, there were days that her child was being a bit niggly and whatever, and that was it. You know, her husband just brought the baby to set, and she was sitting. We've got beautiful pictures of her sort of sitting in front of the monitor, breastfeeding the child, looking into the monitor, and you know. And I think that women should have the freedom to do that, because that is how we roll at the moment, you know. And that is, I think women should be given the freedom to do that, and it should never be frowned upon in terms of the industry, because. Also, the other thing that is happening in the industry, which for me is so exciting, that it's the production team are getting younger and younger. And that is so inspiring, because unfortunately, well, I won't say unfortunately, but the old guard have now sort of retired, and along with the new guard comes, or should I say, the young Turks come new ideas and new inspiration, and me being an old 65-year-old actress, I'm so inspired by the way, firstly, by the way we as older actors are being treated, number one, which is unbelievably great and beautiful. And secondly, just the way, the people are coming up with new ideas that I've either forgotten about, or I mean, you guys are just so amazing. So you need to afford yourselves that kind of, you know, if my kid's being niggly, I'm sorry, I'm bringing my child to work, and maybe the person who's doing the catering can actually look after my child for 5 minutes if need be, you know, or whatever. But honestly and truly, a space needs to be held for that kind of thing as well. Sorry if I'm waffling.
Great.
No, I did exactly the same thing, Vanette. When I directed my first film, my child Anjum was on set with me too. Actually, my second film, she was on set with me. And when I directed Hip Hop Revolution, everybody remembers me as being very pregnant. And I went into false labor on set. Actually, they had to rush me to hospital.
Yeah.
And after Anjum was born, I directed a documentary called The Feminine Divine, and she was an infant, and she was with me on the entire shoot.
Yeah. I just think we need to break away from this idea of, you know, because that's such a patriarchal thing of, oh, women need to know their place, you know, on a film set or whatever. Excuse me, but it's a load of BS, you know.
Yeah, Vanette, I liked your story about, you know, when you weren't cast for as the Mother Mary in the Nativity play, and you rewrote the play. But that's not the only time you've written. You've also written some other plays, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Mm-hmm.
I have.
Do you want to talk about that? Yeah.
Yes, of course. I wrote, you know, there was a time where, or rather, I'm a strong believer in, if work is not available for you, make it for yourself. You know, so I wrote 2 plays which have been quite successfully produced and also received, both in Afrikaans. Funny, all my writing's been in Afrikaans recently. I wonder why. I suppose for 19 years on Sewende Laan, you kind of start eating, sleeping, and dreaming in Afrikaans. So I wrote, the first play was called The Ongelooflike Reis van Max and Lola, which translated into English means The Incredible Journey of Max and Lola, which was about 2 very old friends who basically reached the zenith of their friendship and their age. Both of them sort of in their 80s, and one being a white gay man and the other being, for want of a better term, a colored woman. And they met at a library in those days when libraries weren't open to people of color. And he used to sneak her in, and that's how they became friends. And for many, many years, they sort of did things together. And then after 1994, their friendship really, became quite solid. And the friendship was always solid, but then they became old together and things. And she starts suffering from dementia, and it's his 80th birthday. So, it's all about their journey. It was very well received at various festivals, and it had run at the Baxter Theatre. So, again, this is why it's important that we are able to, experiment or to put our works on at festivals to see how it actually works on a stage, so that it can then travel to a festival, at least to a mainstream theatre. Mm-hmm. The other one that I wrote is called Invisible. It's about a bergie or a mountain person or a homeless person more than anything else, who ends up on the streets of Cape Town, and it's not it's not an uncommon story, but it's her story, and it has its roots in District 6 and the forced removals, and how it affected her and her family, and the terrible effect that the forced removals had on families, having moved them into cramped areas like Mitchell's Plain and so on, and how she then eventually finds her way back to what I call the open wound of District 6, and then hanging around the Cape Town area.
Sure. Thanks, Gwen. You've already touched on two things that I wanted to explore a bit further. One of it is language, because we've got 11 official languages in the country. You've spoken about how you've written productions in Afrikaans and English. Yeah. Valma, maybe you can talk to us a bit about, is enough being done to promote films, for example, in the other official languages?
So there's a lot of push for South African content because it's on television and because there's a lot of money for it. There's a lot of money for South African content in Afrikaans. But let us not forget that we have 11 national languages. So I think it is very important. As I mentioned, at the Durban International Film Festival, we have Isipetu, which is an audience outreach and film training learnership program. And we have a Zulu script writing program in partnership with the Writers Guild of South Africa. And we're hoping to roll that out through UKZN and then to other regions of South Africa so it can be replicated in other languages. Now, when you call for indigenous language scripts, you have to ask yourself, how do we write these indigenous language scripts when we never see any of our indigenous languages anywhere except the SABC? And the SABC has done, I believe, a great job of trying their best to integrate the national languages we have and subtitling the programs that they have. People have a lot of criticism of the SABC, but if you watch the programs, they are there as a learning exercise. They are there as an educational exercise so that I can watch a program in Xhosa or Zulu or Sotho or any other language and still read the subtitles. So I think we need to talk about media literacy. We need to talk about education, outreach, audience development into the underserviced areas where people have obviously been exposed to a lot of international media and are watching American shows and Hollywood productions. And I like to say that really has nothing to do with us. That's my line, and I'm sticking to it. I mean, we have our own cultures, right? We have our own cultures, and we are not Hispanic, and we are not Black Americans, and we are not ex-slaves, so we have to look very carefully at our cultural identities, and that includes our Cape Malay culture, our Cape colored culture with Afrikaans language, our Zulu culture in KZN, our Sotho culture or Ndebele culture. Those are the things we do need to develop. And by developing that, we will develop our cultural identity and our cultural assets.
Sure.
Can I just come in here for a sec? What I find, and something that I've been thinking about, and yes, I understand that we have so many, we have 11 official languages, and we need to cater to all of those. But perhaps the money pool is not big enough for us to do that. So what prevents us then from saying, okay, well, I'm just looking at something like Legacy, for instance, which I have a small role on. They work in English Afrikaans, in Sotho, as well, English Afrikaans and Sotho. So I think those are the three main languages that they work in. So why can we not be writing scripts in various languages in the same in the same movie, for instance,
Absolutely.
do you know what I'm saying? Same movie,
Absolutely.
same soap, same script kind of thing, instead of separating them, because this is South Africa. We're all in it together.
Exactly.
You're
absolutely right, because if you think about how we live in Cape Town, we live in Cape Town, we speak English, we speak Afrikaans when it's required. Other people speak maybe Arabic, Muslim people may speak Arabic, and that should be celebrated. And those different languages there's no reason that they can't be integrated into a feature script or into a play. That is the beauty of the variety of cultures that we inhabit, that we can sort of mix them all together.
So in other words, so that if we're doing there was something that was just done on ETV. Maybe I shouldn't be naming all these things, but something that was just done on ETV recently, which also English Afrikaans and in Nguni language. In fact, I think there were two. They spoke isiXhosa as well as Zulu.
Wonderful.
So we must really start thinking about integrating languages, and if, for instance, the characters are living in an environment, if I'm a brown woman or a person of color living amongst people who speak Zulu or whatever, she should be able to pick it up, pick up some words at least. So show that there is an integration of language, because this is where we live,
Yeah, just to comment on that, we also have a kind of problem of exclusion when it comes to content creation.
Right.
If you look at a platform like Mnet, for example, where you have a channel dedicated exclusively to Afrikaans,
right,
on about colored people, or content on colored people, which sits in its own divide and rule platform with its own channel. And life doesn't exist that way. We communities don't exist in that way. We are all people and we interact with each other. And this is a problem in the way that South African stories are written. A lot of them is that it's kind of zones into one thing, and it's not inclusive in terms of telling many different narratives in one story, you know, because as individuals on a daily basis, we interact with different people all the time, and I'd like to see more diversity in how stories are crafted, and how platforms are showcasing these stories, because to me it certainly is problematic that there's a channel which shows Afrikaans only for colored speaking people by colored speaking people, and it generates huge revenue, but on the other hand there's a different channel where it's predominantly white Afrikaans speaking people, you know. So why are these white and colored people not speaking to each other in the same
format and show?
In the same show, in the same series, like you did in Seven de Laan, Vanette. Because that's one of the things about the SABC.
Yes.
As much as we have a problem with them, one of the things that they were really good at was trying to be inclusive in the way that series are put together, that it's diverse and culturally inclusive.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You see, we are Seven de Laan, for instance. They started out as an exclusively Afrikaans show, okay, but then as time went by, they realized that there's a need. You know, and they looked at statistics and they looked at whatever, and they realized that there was a need. I think the Lifestyle Monitor or whatever showed them. So they slowly started transforming and did whatever they needed to do, you know. But I absolutely agree with you about the and you know, maybe the channels should be named. But I absolutely agree with you about those two channels that cater exclusively for Afrikaans told by, you know, people of color or whatever. But again, this started off with a whole patriarchal way of thinking, you know, and that's what makes me quite angry, because it's again that 75% of people in the Western Cape who speak Afrikaans, yes, and I understand that, but they also understand English, you know, and they also understand even they might understand a bit of Xhosa. So why not, you know, why not do the integration? Why not look at all the languages, you know? But unfortunately, we get stuck in a rut, or should I say, people in power get stuck in a rut, and they do what works for them because it brings in the money.
Well, yeah, but revenue, if I can just say, I think we can see from all the streaming platforms that a diversity of viewpoints is bringing a greater amount of revenue than anything before, or there would be no push for diversity.
Absolutely.
So we have to talk about integration. And on that note, I think we need to talk about transformation in the content creation space and in the film industry as a whole, production all the way up and down.
Let's get to that just now. If you've just joined us, you're listening to Cornerstone Critical Dialogues on Bush Radio 89.5 FM. I've got two guests in the studio with me, Viam Williams and Velma Pfaff, and on the line from Johannesburg, we have Vanette Ibrahim. My next guest is going to be Anton Fischer, who couldn't be with us in the studio tonight, but I did an interview with him earlier today, and we're going to listen to a recording of that interview just now. But just to introduce Anton, he is the writer and co-producer of the short fiction film Address Unknown, which won the award for Best Short Film at the South African Film and Television Awards in 2021. And the film is currently streaming on Showmax. It deals with forced removals that took place in District 6. It was directed by Nadine Klutter. And Anton has completed his second short fiction film since then, which was filmed in the Free State province in the Sesotho language, and it's called Leshana, which means the lie. So let's listen to that clip.
So Address Unknown was my first venture into the film industry, and I was quite excited by it. It's a short film, 24 minutes in duration. And it was shot in some areas of District 6 that are still existing. And of course, it deals with the forced removals, but from the point of view of a postman who used to live and work in District 6. And the idea behind the concept of the film is really that this postman struggles to deliver letters to people who are no longer there. And of course, the traumatic effect it has on a person like the postman, whose relatives, friends, neighbors have all disappeared, and he has these stacks of letters that he cannot deliver. So that's basically the concept. And it was really, really a great project. Of course, it has won the award for Best Short Film, which I'm very chuffed about, and everybody that worked on the project is very chuffed about. So yeah, that was a great plus for us. Yeah, and there's still there's still a lot of interest in the film. It's currently showing and being streamed on local platforms. So yeah, that was quite a good thing. I mean, you see, what I tried to do is I didn't want to do a documentary because there have been some documentaries made already about it. Viam has done a documentary which won several awards. And so my approach was to take a more creative approach, well, a different approach rather, let me say a different approach, and come up with a creative concept, such as this postman who cannot deliver letters, you know. So yeah, that was it in terms of the making of the film. You know,
how did you sort of get into the film industry?
Well, I started off by writing a short story. And then I thought, no, this short story is not working. Maybe I'm not suited to writing short stories or novels. You know, so I thought, let's try the film industry. And that's where I got started. Of course, you know, it takes ages to get a film done, hey? This short film took approximately 3 years because it takes, I mean, you need to first of all develop a script, and that I did in conjunction with the National Film and Video Foundation, NFVF. They really the only major funder for emerging filmmakers, you know, people who are trying to enter the industry, like myself. So you work with them until the script is ready for production, and that can take a year. Then, of course, you need to get the production going. That's virtually another year of planning and all of those kinds of things. Fundraising, because the money you get from the NVF is never really sufficient. Well, depends on the type of production. But the money that I got from the NVF was really, really insufficient for the budget that we had in mind. So I had to crowdfund to make up the rest of the budget. So it takes a while to get going in terms of production. But as I said, for me, the entry into the film industry was really another creative avenue that I was exploring to sort of find some creative outlet, you know, because I was working in journalism and government communications, and I thought it's time that I do something a bit more creative, you know, than working in a bureaucracy and so on.
So when one talks about the National Film and Video Foundation, are they like an organization similar to like the National Arts Council that's set up specifically to fund creative people?
Yes.
And so do they put out calls for funding proposals, or how does it work? Can you apply at any time, or is there very specific periods in which you have to apply for funding?
Yeah, the National Film and Video Foundation is actually an agency of the Department of Arts and Culture.
Okay.
Sport and Recreation. And so they're an agency of that. So they're a government agency, and they put out calls on a regular cyclical basis, which is probably 3 times a year. And then they call for submissions. Now they would call, the submissions could either be for short films, feature-length films, documentaries, you know. So those are the types of things that they would call for. and then you submit your proposal, and then you will eventually get a response from them whether it gets a go-ahead or not.
Sure.
So that's where the funding comes from. So it's a government agency that funds. And one thing I must say is that they really go the extra mile to encourage local filmmakers to tell local stories, stories about our history, stories about our communities, you know. So there is that outlet for those kinds of stories to be told.
Sure.
And in many cases, you don't get those kind of outlets for our stories to be told.
No, sure. But they're really a funding agency. So if you were a person new to the film industry and you had none of the technical skills, you have this idea. I mean, that's not necessarily the first step you would have to go for to get technical support in terms of making a film, right? So in terms of your background, did you have that sort of skill set already in terms of well, let's talk about script writing, then actually filming and editing and all of that. Where does that fit into it?
Well, I had none of that. So I had none of those filmmaking technical skills, you see. So there is, as you mentioned quite rightly, there's a whole range of skills that are required to make a film, right? Starting from a concept, writing the script for based on that concept, then production of the film based on the script that you have written, and then of course there's post-production, which involves editing and other final touches to the film, mixing in the sounds and so on. So I had none of those skills, and I think that for me was fine. It's fine. That my strength would be the creative, conceptual kind of thinking around what's a nice idea that one can flesh out into a script, So, and I never had any of the other. So the thing is, once you have that concept and once you fleshed it out into a script, you would, and in my case, I would then need to approach other people. Like I would need to approach someone like Nadine Kluter, who directed the film. I would need to approach someone like Dominic Tsotsi, who was a co-producer on the film, right? And then the three of us would sit and we would then figure out who are the other technical people we need. The director of photography, the camera person, costumes and wardrobes, who are, and finding locations. All of these things need to fit in for you to make the film. So I started off right at the start at stage one, right, which is the script writing, story development stage, and I knew nothing about that, right? And then I had to get into the production stage, and I knew nothing about that. Then I had to get into the post-production stage, and I knew nothing about that. But yeah, for me, it was a steep learning curve. And even now it remains, obviously, a steep learning curve. Because as you said, I did not study film or television production. But you see, the problem also, Stephen, is that from what I gather, and again, this is just a first glance, it's not really a deep study that I've undertaken, but at first glance, there are a lot of technical people out there, qualified technical people, like your persons who can manage a camera, persons who can record your sound, persons who can edit, etc. The kind of technical skills. What I think, and this again is just an observation, it's not necessarily research that I've done, but I think the observation that I've made is that there are a lot of people with those technical skills. There are very few people who have the creative capacity to actually take a concept, turn it into a story, and hand it over to the technical people, say, here's the story, make a film, That's just an observation, because
sure.
there are many schools that teach people filmmaking, but in many cases they end up learning the technical skills and they don't acquire the creative skills.
Sure.
For those of you out there feeling that you missed your chance at getting a higher education, there's still time. Make 2022 your year and grab the chance. Whether you're after a degree or a higher certificate, Cornerstone Institute offers an extensive range of programs from psychology and business to community development and education. With so many options, your future couldn't be brighter. Applications are now open, so visit cornerstone.ac.za today to enroll. Your future starts at Cornerstone.
Welcome back, everyone. That was the interview I did earlier with Anton Fisher, the filmmaker who was involved in the production of Address Unknown. Viam, I'm sure there's a lot that you can relate to in what he shared with us. But I just want to talk to you a bit about, as if you were a newcomer to the industry now, what would you like to be different from what you had when you started off in the film industry a few years ago?
Oh, wow. I think, when I started out with Hip Hop Revolution, it was such a big success in the US. We had a screening at Silver Docks in the US, and I was flown over to Washington, and I got there, and there was a queue going around the block for Hip Hop Revolution. And it was completely sold out, and they had to turn people away. And the film shortly after that won an award from Best Edited Film Award at Real Sisters in the US, and Spike Lee was the head of the jury that year. And I came home and I submitted to a local film festival, one that's still running here, local documentary film festival, and I got a rejection letter, and I just feel like I was really stifled, and that there were many people who could have assisted me along in my career, and they didn't. Instead, doors were shut, closed in my face, and it's because, I can't say exactly why, but I experienced discrimination not only because I'm a woman, not only because I'm a woman of color, but also because I'm a Muslim woman of color. And so I've experienced that kind of discrimination in the industry from the very beginning. And I allude to it in my short film 2 Use, where there's the comment about the character who doesn't drink because she's not socializing with them and she's not drinking alcohol with them. And so she's not part of their discussion, and she doesn't flow into their circle, So I would like to see a lot more inclusion and transformation and diversity in this industry, and respect. And for me, I'm really open to assisting people, because there's that saying that, like, your candle doesn't burn out by lighting someone else's, and and we seem to have that mentality in this country. We have this mentality of shutting people out, a culture of exclusion, and that's my biggest obstacle, challenge that I face in the film industry in South Africa. And it's not really an obstacle for me anymore, because I have achieved quite good success internationally with regards to my work, and there seems to be a demand for the work, but it's a slippery slope. So we have to swim really hard, and it's really that saying of swimming upstream. Swimming against all odds. If you want to be a filmmaker, you really, really have to want to be a filmmaker. And so I'd like to see, if I was starting out now, I think it would be different, because now we have BEE, and now we're talking inclusion and diversity, and now we're talking about women in this space, and we're talking about different voices and different narratives, and those are really important conversations, and it's opening up doors for many women of color, for diverse people, for all kinds of people.
Mm-hmm. Sure, thanks. Velma, you touched on transformation before the break. Do you want to talk a bit more about what Velma's just shared with us? Yeah.
Yeah, Wilhelm, I've had exactly the same experience you've had. I've been in the production industry here in Cape Town for over 15 years, since 1996 when I arrived back to South Africa from Canada. And I also had many doors shut in my face because I'm not Afrikaans speaking, because I'm not white, and call it what you will. I have international experience. I worked on big, huge U.S., productions like Queer as Folk. I'm an art director. I'm a designer. And I had to push. I had to push and struggle and claw my way to get work and to have a sustainable career, which I barely ever did. So the nepotism and the exclusive access, which Wilhelm talks about, still exists. The cabal, the protected few who get to make movies, who get financed by the NFEF and by other institutions, and who get pushed through. There are the celebrated few, and everyone else is excluded. And that's changing, thankfully. So I think what I would like to see if I was a young filmmaker, and I know some young filmmakers starting out, they also just want access. They want access. They need training. They need to be mentored properly. And what often happens, which we have to be very wary of, is you're offered a place at the table, but you're not given the same resources. So just like we discussed earlier, you're a woman, you're in an industry, but you're also a mother, a wife, a child rearer, an educator. Maybe you're caring for your elderly parents. Where are we having those conversations? Where are we saying a woman pursuing her creative career has to achieve it in the same time span as a man? Men have the support system of women, but women don't have a support system. They are the support system. So we have to be, I think we need to legislate inclusion. That is definitely my game. To lobby for inclusion, to lobby for production levies, to make sure that when people hire people of color or colorful people, that they get the proper training and the access to information they require. Because in the past it's been, we'll hire you and we'll give you absolutely no resources. So over here you might get $1 million budget to make a movie and you'll get all the crew you need. But over here, if you're of color, you may get no resources, no access, no money. And then when you fail, that's it. That's the end of your career. So we have to be able to sponsor true transformation. And we have been talking about this for 20 years. And we're still pushing to have directors of color, women or men, DPs of color, that's director of photography, editors of color, and do we have any distribution channels that are managed by people of color? I think only at the SABC.
Yeah, they're one or two, but we don't have very many distribution networks in South Africa.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's what we need. So maybe we need to talk about, having our own distribution channels, meaning we do have Video Vision, that's on Unsing. He's the biggest distributor in the country. Maybe the Western Cape needs to look at formulating their own distribution channels so that they can distribute their own films.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely do need a kind of regional distribution space here. Yeah, because the ones that I know are Johannesburg based. Yeah. And there seems to be this trend that with the streamers, the distributors are pushing forward rom-coms only.
I know.
And it's all these heroines that are unrelatable. So that it's like these black women with wigs and long eyelashes and fake nails and high heels and tight dresses, and I don't know people like that.
Exactly. Me either.
And I don't understand why when I watch Netflix, even for example, and the local content coming through, and I'm kind of looking at it. I'm like, okay, but this is not relatable to me. I don't know people like this. As much as we're trying to say that not all black people live in townships, that they are middle class. We're trying to tell middle class stories, but the women, the stereotypes for women that are out there, it's actually quite appalling.
It is. It is. And that's what I talked about earlier when I mentioned building authentic stories and telling Indigenous stories with integrity that speak to who we are as a people means telling a variety of stories, right? We also don't want to continue to see gangsters, black gangsters, colored gangsters, stories about colored prisoners. That's all we see, isn't it? We see gangsterism, we see numbers gangs, those are the stories that get told. People on the Cape Flats, it's drugs, prostitution, all that. So there are many other stories to tell, and I think that's what Barakat does offer. It's a family story. It's probably about love. I don't even really know. I haven't seen it. But we need to tell stories that are authentic and that represent the variety and diversity of our culture. And that's, I think, we have to be very careful about modeling ourselves after another culture. We are not Hollywood, and therefore we should not be presenting ourselves as, the way Hollywood represents people of color or black people or Hispanic people. So we have to be very careful of how we are represented as Africans. And that's where it comes to fostering growth and transformation. And again, if you don't have transformation on the ground, if the people making the movie are not diverse, if the people writing the films are not diverse, and if the money and the financing is not supporting a diversity of industries, then the money's all staying in one little pool, and it's only benefiting a certain class of people, and it's not offering access to the greater community. And that is not sustainable.
Sure. Vanette, I'd like to bring you in. I hope you're still with us.
Yes, I am. Sure. I've been trying to say, can I come in? Can I come in?
Please come in.
Sorry, just on the topic of, the whole stereotyping and gangsters and whatever the case may be. I also just want to say this, that I know that we try and make movies, or we're trying to make movies that are not stereotypical, that are not showing, colored people or brown people or people of color as just the gangsters and whatever the case may be. But we're also looking at the reality of South Africa. We also need to tell the stories of the underbelly of South Africa. As much as we would like to say, no, we're now going to, do the this. How does one put this? The Barakats, I don't know whether you've watched the series Skimmer Dance, which I did, which I was a part of as well, which definitely sort of shows the nightlife and the jazz clubs, and there is also, a definite feel of gang rule. Excuse me for one sec. I've suddenly got a frog in my throat. But it's not your skitskop and Dorner gangsterism with pangas and, whatever. It is done in quite a sort of Hollywood way. But we have to be very careful and about trying to sugarcoat what this country is all about. Because, yes, while we are wanting to move away from the stereotypical kind of gangsterism, it does exist. So if we're going to be telling stories, it's like trying to move away from the political situation in this country. We can't. It doesn't matter what story you tell, unless it's a rom-com, somewhere on the Werveld or whatever. You cannot move away from the political system of this country. Somehow it affects the stories that you tell. So, it's a very difficult situation. I was just listening to Anton Fischer just now, and I was thinking, oh my Lord, my script Invisible is very similar. And, how do we do this? Is this a race to get, who do we, whose movie gets produced first? because mine is also a fictional story, which has its roots in District 6. So it's a very difficult thing. Maybe it's an ageist thing. I don't know, but this is the reality of South Africa. So how do we? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think if I could make a comment about that, I mean, we mustn't forget that we're dealing with, it's film. I mean, film is a certain suspension of reality unless you make it a documentary. So what I'm looking at is we cannot, caricaturize our own characters. We cannot only show black men in positions of, gangsterism or taxi drivers or undereducated or lower class. You know what I mean? We know this. We know that the SABC is giving us a more varied look at the world, affluent, estate owners, lawyers, doctors, everybody is being represented, which is good. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying we have to move away from political stories.
Are you punting the SABC?
No, not at all. Not at all, but I have to tell you, I have a television.
I just need to ask that question because you've been, you've mentioned them quite a few times.
No, it's only because I actually have a television and I don't have DSTV, and I actually watch, what is on public television just to understand what is available. So I'm just saying that we mustn't look to the stereotypical representation in story, because we must be very careful that we ourselves do not caricaturize ourselves, that colored people are like this, or all the aunties and the omas are like that.
The underbelly of this country is not only colored or black. The underbelly of this country is also very much white.
I know that.
Poor white.
So yes, I know that.
Yeah, I'm when I say the underbelly of this country, I'm talking about across the board. That is just the nature. It's like Brazil. It's like Chicago. It's like, so that is the reality of where we live.
Yeah, of course. But that's an economic reality.
Mm-hmm.
I get it.
Yeah. I also know that, Vinit, you've also did a play on Alan Pakis, which I think also probably becomes relevant to this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's that stories that also have to be told. And I hear both sides. I hear that the need to tell those authentic stories and those real stories, but also the risk of stereotyping and caricaturing. And I think many, I suspect many young people might also want to move away from some of those stories and move away from the sort of, a lot of our stories to date have had those sort of political overtones.
Absolutely.
The very realness of apartheid still exists,
because it's, sorry to interject, but it's a multi-generational trauma. We have to recognize the trauma, and I think that's what Wiham deals with in her stories. You're dealing with a woman, a Muslim woman, and maybe her perspective on her own life and her mental capacity, etc. You're dealing with, poverty. You're dealing with economic oppression and cultural oppression, and so these are ways for us to try to exercise the emotional trauma and the multi-generational trauma that we've all suffered, and that does not exclude anyone, because it doesn't exclude the whites in the country. It doesn't exclude the previous national government or any of the people who perpetrated the crimes against the majority of the population here. It means that we have to all work together to move past, but also through it. So it's not a way. It's not a way of eradicating the stories. It's a way of enlivening and enriching the stories, so that we can then celebrate with authenticity who we all are.
And also, just to add to that, sorry, Riam, I know you wanted to say something, but I just quickly want to say something. Is of course, that South Africa was is the second oldest film industry in the world. We just shut down for a very long time. And then coming back, I think these are the stories that have been bottled up inside of us for so long that everyone's bursting to tell them. And it's a natural course of action, and it will settle down at some point, and we will get into the rhythm of them telling other stories, be they fiction or fact or whatever, you know. So I think this is just a matter of course at the moment, you know. So I don't know. That's just my feeling.
Okay, yeah, like District 6 Rising from the Dust, that's exactly the story. It's a story of intergenerational trauma. And I try to do it in a almost magic realism way. But it's reality, but it's my life inside a documentary. And I moved into a house restituted to my grandfather, and I've said this in many interviews, but what was very different for me with regards to that film is the spiritual and ancestral journey that I underwent as a filmmaker, as part of my life journey, and an understanding of legacy, and in a way, almost the ancestors telling their story through me. And I think, you know, as storytellers, we need to think in a layered way. And there's also a sense of appeasing the past, you know. And just going back to those stereotypes, I don't want to see us exclusively viewed through the lens of these stereotypes, because, you know, even the gangster has feelings and could be hurting, and you know, and what I would like to see on our screens are those more nuanced, layered characters that are relatable to ordinary people, and so that our characters are not polarized, and you know, we are not all not all colored people are teachers. So there's that Afrikaans saying, so dronk soos 'n kleerlingonderwyser. And there's all this subtext, you know, in terms of who we are.
Yeah, and that speaks to the, sorry to interject, but that speaks to the, you know, if you don't have a multi-layered view of a character, then it's much easier to discriminate against them. So if you put them in a singular view, and you sort of put everybody in one little silo, then it's much easier to not include them, right? So we need these multi-layered stories. We need these multi-dimensional characters to speak to the fact that everyone is more than just this caricature of how you see them if you never react or never interact with them. And I think that's what's important for story making.
Yeah, I mean, also if we look at the South African industry and where we rank internationally, the last time South Africa won an Oscar was with Gavin Hood, and it is based on Tsotsi, which is an amazing literary work. And I feel like we're really lagging behind in terms of the rest of the world. I must say that Tsotsi won. I mean, I love Gavin Hood, I love his work, but I had my vote on the Palestinian film. The runner-up Palestinian film. I was really hoping they would win on that particular year. And, you know, I think that there's so much work in the craft of writing. And we're really undervaluing this this notion of authorship in South Africa, and there's not enough resources, energy, and collective consciousness put into producing amazing South African stories.
Developing writers, yeah.
You know, and it's really is setting us apart from the rest of the world because we're lagging behind.
Well, we have to think that we don't have the economic resources, right? So as a country lacking in a large middle class, we don't have 80% of the population does not have a university degree or the economic acumen to sit at home and write a script for 5 years.
Also, only recently that it's been available to us. You know, for us to get into the whole process.
Exactly.
So those are things that we have to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, recent access. Exactly. I spoke earlier about true transformation requires access, and access requires resources. You know, you can't just say, oh, we want authentic Indigenous stories. That was Netflix pitch. Yeah. And do you think people who live in the townships who make 100 Rand a day have time to write an authentic Indigenous story when they have to support 5 people and are still living in a shack
Sorry,
without
just to
running
cut
water?
in there, Velma, this whole notion of authentic Indigenous stories coming from South Africa and coming from the continent is always curated from the white gaze, you know? And we always have these threshold guardians curating these authentic Indigenous stories. And for me, the most interesting dynamic in the film industry at the moment are the black women who are part of the chessboard for those white men, you know? And that's the most interesting dynamic to watch, because those are the black women that will stab their own sisters in the back to pay lip service to those white threshold guardians who are putting out those authentic Indigenous stories.
Yeah,
Well said,
yeah.
William.
You know, I just wanted to add this little thing that upset me earlier on. I was looking at the comments when Cornerstone put up this ad to say that we were going to be on radio, and there was a comment made by somebody to say, "So where's the black representation on this panel tonight?" And I just thought, okay, so I was going to reply to this and say, so, you know, how are we not good enough? Are we not good enough for this?
Well, you should know the answer to that question.
I know.
Are we not black enough? Or are we not white enough? I mean, I sit in a chair where I've been sitting my whole life. I'm not white enough to be white, or black enough to be black, or even colored enough to be colored. So we don't qualify as black in Africa because we are of color. And therefore, yeah, we have always been, you know, we're sandwiched by 2 bookends.
And yet, as Rian says, the black sisters will stab us in the back. But, I mean, I don't want to get into that conversation because, you know, it's a very generalized
Vanette,
statement to make.
It's a very sore point. It's a very sore point because we've always been black and we've always identified as being black.
Politically, we always have.
Yeah,
Politically,
and then
we
when
always
people
have. You know,
view you as other or not black enough.
But
your life experience is that of a black person, because my family lost their land under apartheid due to the forced removal. So because my parents' marriage was never recognized by the state because we're Muslim, you know. So because my skin is lighter than yours, you're saying that my oppression is less.
Exactly. And we are, and let's not forget, we are all, those of us who are colored and from the Cape, we are Khoi and San people, and we are indigenous to this land. We are not having any query about Nguni tribes or about the migration of people into South Africa, and we must support each other. We must not do what is the usual plan to divide and separate, right? We mustn't try to vilify other people who have also been oppressed.
Yeah.
It's important for all of us. We may suffer and have wounds, but really we have to support each other, because it doesn't serve anyone except the previous government or the people in power who still may feel that we don't have a seat at the table. You know, we must work together, and we must work together across the board to support all Indigenous and local people so that we can all, you know, progress.
Well, that's exactly what we've been talking about earlier, about you know, inclusivity and the languages, and can we not be, you know, sort of, can we not make movies that are inclusive of all languages and, you know, things like that. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure. Oh, this is a great conversation, but we are sort of fast running out of time. And I'm not going to have more time. Unfortunately, I won't be allowed to run over because there's another show after this. So what I do want to do us to do, though, is one of the questions we sort of asked, you know, at the beginning was, what is needed for the local film industry to realize its full potential? Now, both you, Vanette, spoke about the fact that we're the second oldest film industry in the world. And Vial made a comment about how she doesn't think that we've really, you know, delivered, we should be further along the road.
Yes.
So what do you think are the sort of hurdles? What is keeping us back as a film industry in South Africa? Well, let's start with you, Vinit.
Oh my goodness, Stephen! You know what? We need to be taken seriously in this country. We need the film, the entertainment industry needs to be taken seriously. I think I'm not sure what the stats are and what maybe Velma can put some light on that in terms of what we do for the global economic situation. But I know that we actually do contribute quite a bit to the global economics of this country. But if we can't even be taken seriously by the National Arts Council, if we can't be taken seriously by government, if we can't be taken seriously by business, then how can we as artists take ourselves seriously? How can producers take us artists seriously? It all comes down to that.
Well, if I could speak to that, Vanette, if I could speak to that, I think it's very imperative that we lobby the government, as you said, to value the cultural assets that we use to contribute to the economics of the country. I know the industry used to be somewhere in the line of 400 or 500 million rands in revenue, but I'm sure it's much greater than that now. It's just, of course, COVID has really affected the film industry. However, you have to talk about the cultural assets that we're producing here are going international. So now that we have Netflix and Showmax and Amazon picking up our products, we are now, that means we are promoting our culture all over the world. And in that way, we should be supported. Our cultural work should be supported. And that means National Arts Council has to become more accountable. NFVF needs to be more accountable. Money and funding streams need to be transparent. We need to lobby the government so that the government puts more money out there. The IDC is there. They have hundreds of millions of rands. And it's just very difficult and very labor intensive to access funding. And once again, there's very little transparency and accountability in the industry. And that is what we must push for. And that is what I would ask anybody in the film industry who is alive and well and still able to support themselves to write letters, write to your minister, write to the Minister of Arts and Culture, email the NFVF, email the IDC, email the DTI. They exist. These emails, this information's online. Get online, find out who you can write to, and ask them to become more transparent and to assist you to access financing.
You do know what happened to our poor sister Sibongeli Ngoma not so long ago when she, because and for the Arts have been very active in trying to get information from the National Arts Council. And I mean, they have just been absolutely, it's been horrendous what has been going on there. And I'm afraid Nati Mpetwa needs to really, really shake up his act. He needs to shape up or ship out because he knows nothing. And our sister was stooped in the street because of her activism for all of us, by the police. And I'm afraid
I did see that. That's crazy.
Sure.
Yeah,
you have to know that in the film sector, people have been waiting for relief money for over 8 months from a foundation that was supposed to distribute COVID relief funding to people in the media industry, somewhere in the vein of like 300 million rand. And it has never been distributed, or we can't really make out who received the funding.
So the NAC has problems, but the NAVF also has problems because, the NAVF, we don't know who is evaluating, who are evaluating our script applications. So as creative producers, our IP is not protected when we submit to the NAVF. And I feel like these secret panels from which the NAVF and both the SAFTAs operate, it's not productive to the industry, and we need bigger transparency.
Well, unfortunately, that's going to be all that we've got time for tonight. I'm sorry to have to sort of end up on a note where there's so many more questions than answers. But thank you so much, Viam and Valma and Vanette, for joining this evening. Please stay tuned. The next show is Community Champions on Bush Radio with our CEO of Cornerstone Institute, Noel Daniels. We'll be talking to human rights lawyer and activist Gary Jansen. But that is all we unfortunately have time for tonight. Thank you for joining. We are playing out with Midnight Blue by Mansoor Jaffa, which features in Address Unknown, the short film by Anton Fisher. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Unlearning proposes that new ways of learning can only be acquired when individuals unlearn those thoughts, those emotions, and those behaviors that prevent us from fully flourishing in the world.
2 weeks into the course, my heart already knew that my entire viewpoint on humanity was going to change.
During the years that I've worked with Taryn, she has assisted me in seeing the potential as an individual, and the course has changed my life for the better. I am the person that I am today because of the course that I enrolled for.
I've been lecturing the content for 7 years, and every year I am in awe of students who share how the content has transformed them both academically and personally. I believe that the world right now is in desperate need of an education that equips individuals with both academic and personal development skills.
Before this course happened, I used to hate people from the bottom of my soul. But after this course, for the first time in my life, I can say that I no longer hate people. I can finally say that I no longer see people for their circumstances, but rather for who they are as people and who they can become.
The things that I learned in my early childhood about who I was not and who I was supposed to be. However, the course showed me the true identity of myself. It showed me that it was okay to be vulnerable. It showed me that it was okay to heal. And throughout the course, I have grown tremendously.
And the unlearning course does that. I realized that the content was so powerfully transformative that it would be irresponsible, that it would be selfish for me not to share it with the world. Unlearning is really a course that I've been lecturing for 7 years, but I've made it bigger, I've made it better, and I'm excited to incorporate the performing arts. I do not believe that unlearning needs to be clinical and boring. We can also make unlearning entertaining and fun.
To anyone that would want to enroll in this course, it will not only benefit you academically, but also individually. It will assist you in presenting yourself as the true individual that you are, but it will also assist you in healing and journeying the life process.
This course was the missing puzzle piece that I needed in my journey of self-transformation and self-discovery. And most of all, this course taught me how to unlearn this toxic behavior and how to choose happiness and positivity in the present and to stop worrying about tomorrow.
The gift of this course is that it is universally applicable to any personal and professional context. Cornerstone, learn to change the world.
In this time of great uncertainty, there's one thing you can be certain of: your education. Our wide range of online programs let you upskill yourself and earn a leading-edge qualification from the comfort of your own home. We've been educating Africa for 50 years, so we know how to adapt to our forever changing landscape. Learn to change the world and take control today. Speak to one of our student advisors. Visit cornerstone.ac.za to enroll now.